Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Crunch Punchman, and this week we're going to be taking a look at something you don't really see on shows like Hoarders, and that's how hoarding disorder can completely and utterly destroy a house. And I'm not just talking about the trash and the stains, and I'm definitely not talking about clutter. This is how hoarding can just utterly destroy physically a house. Now understand that what you're looking at here is not simply hoarding disorder. This is severe mental illness. Really severe. This is mental illness that's so severe that this person can't live on their own without full-time help. Now, thankfully, this person is no longer in this house, and I don't know their backstory. I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping that they're in a home at this point. But I can tell you that not one single thing was salvageable from this house. We uncovered holes that were so big I could have jumped through them, and the bottoms of every lower cabinet had completely rotted out, including through the subfloor. You can actually see down into the crawl space below the house. If you've never entered a place like this, consider yourself lucky, but the smell is indescribable. I can tell you how to reproduce it. Go down to your city dump, and if you're in a large city, they will have one section that's just for like organics, old wasted food, rotten clothing, things that break down over time. If you're in a smaller town, they just throw all the trash together typically. Go there and just dig around in that for about 6 hours. It's not just the smell of rot, because the worst part of the rotting smell is right toward the beginning when things start to first break down. This is more like a late stage rot, and the closest description I can come up with for that is death, spoiled milk, and urine. When you walk into this place for even more than a couple minutes, your skin will smell like it. It'll be in your hair. Your clothing becomes saturated in it. It is a literal biohazard, and that's why we're wearing respirators, masks, and gloves. Now you may be wondering why we're not wearing Tyvek suits. That's because there's no air conditioning in this house, and even if there was, we couldn't turn it on because it would just be stirring up any really bad stuff and sending it out into the air. And it happens to be a heat wave here in Illinois. So the inside of this house was 100 degrees or more, not counting the humidity. Putting on a Tyvek suit in those conditions puts us at really great risk for heat stroke. So it's actually, ironically, safer for us to not put on that additional safety gear. Plus, I mean, just sometimes a dude just likes to stink. And the less Tyvek I got on, the more stankin' I get. Now you might be asking yourself, hey, who's that tiny woman stealing all that trash? Is that Jason? No, that's not Jason. That is Barbie from a channel called Clean with Barbie. She is a 5-foot powerhouse, one of the best cleaners on earth. She and her family drove 13 hours from New York to Southern Illinois to help me clean this place. She has a YouTube channel called Clean with Barbie, and I'm going to leave a link to that in the description. If you've never seen her work, you really need to. She does some of the most extreme cleanup and extreme transformations that I've ever seen anywhere on YouTube. And just like me, she does it all for free. Once she starts on a room, she does not stop. Jason and I do a different method where we'll work for a little bit, then take a bit of a break, then work, then break. Barbie has one speed, which is just balls to the wall. So you'll see her working a lot by herself in this bedroom, and then Jason and I will pop in and out. That's because we're doing one of three things. We're either coming into work, then taking a break, or we're bouncing between the kitchen and this bedroom because we had 2 cameras going at once, and we're doing one room while she's doing another. Or Jason and I will be hauling garbage. So she was able to throw garbage bags out the window, then Jason and I would take them out to the dumpster. Speaking of which, we filled a 40-yard dumpster completely full. That's the size of a train car. In my area, those cost $800 for a week, and we're able to provide those to the people that we help because people like you subscribe to the channel. The more people subscribe, the more of these we can do. So if you're not subscribed yet, why don't you take a few minutes break out of your devil worshiping and your disco dancing and actually hit that subscribe button, son. I don't put up with non-subscribing disco dancing devil worshipers. It's not how I roll. That is ironically how Barbie rolls. Now, this is really important. You're going to notice that we don't do any cleaning, like no chemical type of cleaning. We also don't use a vacuum, and there's actually a reason for that. This house is going to have to be gutted clear down to the studs. Everything is ruined. Every inch of this house was covered in mouse poop and mouse urine. Because of the holes in the floors, birds could get into the house, and there's bird poop everywhere. Whoever had this house last had multiple pets, and they climbed up on every countertop and poop. That stuff is never coming out of carpet, ever. You're going to have to pull up the carpet and the subfloor because it's going to soak into the plywood or whatever it is that they use to make subfloor. Moose wood, I think, is what they use. On top of that, the liquid that comes from the poop and the pee has destroyed the fibers of the wood and every countertop in the entire house. If we would have had another week to spend here, we would have made some sort of attempt to actually clean it just for the sake of the video. But not only would that have served no other purpose other than making a cool video, but it would have required for us to put on actual biohazard safety gear. Because it's one thing to be in that house with all that stuff on all the cabinets and countertops and floors and whatnot. It's a completely different thing when we start stirring that up by sweeping and wiping things down and using a paint scraper to get the big chunks of stuff off of everything. That makes everything airborne, and that makes it really, really dangerous. Let's talk about how this disorder destroys a house physically. First of all, understand that hoarding does not just mean the person collects stuff. It's the irrational collecting of things and assigning extreme value to it, even if it's worthless garbage. I get occasional comments from people who will say things like, this isn't hoarding, this is just a bunch of trash. Well, that's what hoarding is. It's literally in the definition of hoarding disorder. Again, this is not just hoarding disorder, though. This is really extreme mental illness. So anyway, the trash piles up because the person won't clean. That provides shelter and food to pests and insects, roaches, spiders, ants, bed bugs, tiny itty bitty moose. Those bugs then expel waste underneath that trash, and then the rot starts. Because the floor is covered in trash, it doesn't allow any moisture to evaporate, so the rot spreads and you start to get mold and bacteria, and that becomes trapped between the trash and whatever surface it's on. So for instance, on this one, it's mostly the floor. That rot then spreads to the subfloor, which softens and weakens it, and before you know it, it caves in and you have a giant hole in the floor. The weight of the hoard then pushes down onto the house over time and makes everything settle. So your plumbing, which is rigid, eventually cracks and starts to leak. In more cases than not, the people who live in these conditions are living in abject poverty. And when you combine the lack of funds with not being able to let somebody even walk through your house to get to the leak just keeps getting worse and worse until it eventually rots through your subfloor. That's something we see in almost every hoarder house we've ever cleaned. The sinks are rotted out, the cabinets below those are rotted out, the water doesn't work, half of the sockets in the house don't work. Eventually, almost everything in the house breaks. You can't get air conditioning because even if the air conditioner worked, all the vents are covered up with trash, so the air can't physically come out of the vents. The same thing with central heat. Almost all these houses either have kerosene heaters or electric heaters because the heat can't come out of the vents. Many of the people who we work with are clinically obese because since the stove no longer works, they end up surviving on microwavable food or fast food. They get extreme breathing problems because they don't realize that they're breathing in bacteria and mold all day, every day. The air ends up saturated in ammonia, and because there's no ventilation, they end up with respiratory problems. Eventually, the dishes pile up, which creates even more rot because you've got food directly on the dishes, and that becomes another home for roaches and pests. When I pulled the very first dish out of the sink in this kitchen, about 1,000 mosquitoes came out because they were breeding in there, which is to say that was actually our final straw to say we've done all we can in this house. This is now too dangerous to work in. So for those of you who have asked me in the past, have you ever had a house that you didn't finish because it was too much? This is the first one. Before those mosquitoes came out of the sink, they already had a mosquito problem outside, and myself, Jason, and Barbie had dozens and dozens of mosquito bites on us. When the 1,000 mosquitoes came out of the sink, it was like, okay, this is too dangerous. At this point, we're going to end up sick, really sick. So we did everything except 2 back bedrooms. Oh, also, before I forget, at one point I made a joke to Barbie. I walked by the refrigerator and said, hey, do you want to open that fridge? And then she's Hungarian and didn't quite get that I was being sarcastic, and she walked over and opened it, but I had since kind of walked away from the fridge. So as soon as I turned around and saw her starting to open that, I screamed out, no! I went back over to close it, and it wouldn't quite close on its own because there was so much stuff inside of it, so I had to kick it closed. If you ever work in a place like this, if you ever decide to help out somebody who's in this situation, never open the refrigerator. Even if you're going to clean out the fridge for them, don't open it until you are absolutely prepared. You will never forget that smell for the rest of your life, I promise you. So why didn't we vacuum the floors? On top of the fact that they're destroyed, yes, we could have vacuumed them. The problem is there was so much animal waste here that I would have had to have thrown away my vacuum after using it. I wouldn't have even trusted a shop vac to do this without throwing it away afterwards. This house was so toxic that I actually threw away the shovel that we used to shovel up the trash. It was so bad that whenever we finished using Jason, we just left him there. Now, Barbie does this stuff week on week. Now, the difference between what she does in New York versus here is that here we could just fling all the trash bags out into the yard and then take them to the dumpster. In New York, she's cleaning the homes of people who are still living in them in these same conditions. She's cleaning an apartment building, so she may bag up 100 bags of garbage that weigh anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds each, and then take them two at a time down 8 flights of stairs to the curb, which is 50 trips. Her videos are seriously amazing to watch. Though I do warn you, if you don't have a strong stomach, some of them you probably won't be able to watch, and definitely never watch them while you're eating. She's Hungarian, and like I said, she's a powerhouse, and her work ethic is absolutely insane. If I had her energy packed into my 6'4" frame, I would basically be a superhero. Or if I'm being honest, a supervillain. There's really no crime in the area that I live in, so I'd have to create some. One of the questions I always get in these videos is, why are you using a shovel in some areas but not in others? If you ever do a place like this, you'll quickly find out that shovels don't work the way you think they work. In dirt, you can just smash the shovel into it, jab it down there, and pull dirt out. It's no big deal. In a house like this, it's often got stacks of magazines and clothing that are interspersed throughout the trash. So when you try to get a shovel into it, the clothing and the books stop the shovel dead. And actually becomes faster to use your hands than it is to use the shovel. But on top of that, when we're working in a place like the bedroom, there's often actual valuable things that you can find in there. And those are mostly memento type of things like birth certificates. Sometimes, but it's kind of rare, we'll find expensive jewelry. And there's almost always some pictures, like family photographs, that we'll try to save. In this house, nothing could be saved, but in a lot of videos where you see us just using our hands, we're oftentimes trying to find the valuable or memento items. Another question I get a lot is, what do you do with your clothes after a cleanup like this? As soon as I get home, I take off my shoes and I either put them outside if they're really bad, or I bang them off and then spray them down with alcohol. My clothes I immediately strip out of and I throw them in their own pile down in my laundry room. Those clothes will be washed separately. I have cleaned houses that were so bad that I just threw my clothes away when I got home. But most of the time they're just washed like any other piece of clothing. I just tend to wash those in their own load. If I know the house is going to be super bad and I don't have any clothes that I wouldn't mind throwing away, I'll just clean the house naked. You don't have to worry about the heat as much when you're cleaning in the nude, but the mosquitoes can become a problem. Out of respect for my son and Barbie who are working with me, I remain clothed during this cleaning almost the entire time. I'm going to bring up one more thing that I get asked about a lot, which is, do I ever call Adult Protective Services on the people who live like this? And there's a reason I'm bringing it up. I'll get to that in a second. I don't, because if a person is asking me for help, I'm not going to punish that by turning them in. But even on top of that, Adult Protective Services will think in the same way, which is if they're getting help, they won't step in because it shows progress and a step forward. In Illinois, it is extremely difficult to get somebody declared incompetent, especially if they're making the effort to improve or they're reaching out for help elsewhere. The reason I'm bringing it up is because if someone were to still be living in this specific house, I would have called APS, because this wasn't just a case of the house being dirty or cluttered or hoarded. This was outright dangerous. If Barbie, Jason, or myself didn't fully know what we were doing and didn't have experience in stuff like this, I wouldn't have allowed anybody in this house to begin with. We all know what we're doing and we're educated on how to protect ourselves. I would not suggest that anybody watching this channel, if you're thinking about starting a cleaning channel, I would not suggest that any of you try what we're doing here. There are viruses and bacteria that live in mouse poop and bird poop that can outright kill you. And if you don't know the difference between different types of masks and safety gear, it would be easy for a layman to just grab a dust mask, which does basically nothing for you in a house like this. You need to know which masks are specifically designed to protect against viruses and bacteria and airborne pathogens. Regular everyday masks don't really do anything for you in a place like this. They may protect from the dust, but they're so porous that like you could accidentally inhale a moose right through the mask if you don't know what you're doing. Trust me, you get a moose in your lungs, you're going to know it, son. You're going to be feeling that for weeks. Let's talk briefly about channel news. I'm still going through autistic burnout, and I'll be honest with you, I was not ready to go back to cleaning yet. I went through this because Barbie was down, this was scheduled, and there was really no turning back from this once we got everything set up. I mean, I paid $800 $20 for a dumpster. I couldn't just let that sit there. But by the end of the first day, I was so exhausted, I couldn't even reach down to grab a handful of garbage. I was out of energy entirely. I'm getting better, and I'm taking things at my own pace after this cleanup had been finished and wrapped up. But I can tell you that there likely will not be another house like this one on the channel going forward. It was too much, both physically and mentally. I consider this cleanup to be kind of a special occasion house that I specifically picked out because Barbie loves stuff like this. But you can expect my channel to continue doing the houses I normally do, which is super cluttered houses that need to be cleaned for people who can't do it themselves. But this really dangerous type stuff, I'm not into it. I'm getting old, man. You little shit. I have been working with APS in my local area who have a couple houses set up for me, and I have 2 or 3 houses even outside of that are waiting for me to get there and do my thing. So we have no lack of content. So you can expect me to get back to that type of cleaning really, really soon because I'm working on those just, right now, basically. In 2 weeks, my wife will be undergoing brain surgery. I will try to get some videos before then stockpiled so that we don't skip a week. But if that's not possible and you're wondering where my video is sometime around the 1st or 2nd week of August, that's why. Though it would be kind of funny for me to take a camera into the hospital and film myself cleaning their stuff, like cleaning patients, leaning over and dusting their faces. For those who are new to the channel, we are trying to shoot for 1 million subscribers, and we are closing in on 600,000. At 1 million subscribers, I get the gold plaque, and that's the only thing that I ask in return for cleaning these houses for free. I'd like to give some special explanation as to why I want that thing, but the truth is I just want it because it's cool. Maybe I'll get a video of me taking that to my dad's grave and showing it to his tombstone and saying, "You said I'd never amount to anything. Well, suck it, Dad." And then he'll start dead crying. His tears will make a dead pool. Anyway, members of the channel, I will see you guys next Wednesday. Everybody else, I'll see you next weekend. Later.